Welcome. Welcome, weary football pilgrims to Lowerleagues. You've walked a long road through rain-lashed terraces and broken turnstiles past the chip van, the man with the rattles, and that one dog that always barks when the away team scores. Tonight, our wandering star is Wimbledon, a club that rose like a paper phoenix from Sunday league ashtrays, soared beyond its station. And then, just as swiftly, was swallowed by the machine. A comet that crashed to Earth not with fire and fury, but with minutes and memorandums. But don't fret. This isn't a tragedy. Not really. It's a bedtime story with muddy boots, home-knitted scarves, and the kind of spirit that refuses to go quietly. So, lie back. Let your mind drift like a wayward cross in a swirling wind. We're going back now to where the tale begins. Let's begin. The dawns of old, a rich and tumultuous history, a humble beginnings. From Wimbledon old centrals to plough lane football, It's a funny old game, but a stubborn one too. Starts not with fireworks or ticker tape, but often with a soggy pitch and a borrowed kit. And in this case, a school, Wimbledon Old Central School to be precise, out on the Common in 1889, a handful of lads cobbled together a team, called it Wimbledon Old Centrals. Doesn't exactly scream glamour, does it? Sounds more like a postal district than a football club, but it tells you what you need to know. Local, rooted and proud of it. They had a bit of early joy too, won the Clapham and Herald Leagues in 95, 96, a humble flex that by 1905 they'd dropped the old Centrals bit, went with the snappy Wimbledon Football Club. A name with aspirations. But even then, the cracks were showing. Money troubles the great equalizer. It's not just today's clubs trying to pay the milkman with a commemorative scarf in 1910. They folded not with a bang but a soft sigh, just quietly disappeared into the mist. But here's the thing with Wimbledon. Folding isn't quite the end. It's more like a long blink. By the next year they were back. Briefly as Wimbledon Borough, before settling into the familiar initials, WFC, a stumble. Yes, but only a prelude to bigger revivals yet to come. Plough Lane came in 1912, their spiritual anchor leased swampland by Hayden's Road Council said it was unfit for cattle. Wimbledon thought it ideal for football. It wasn't pretty. A few tufts, the odd molehill, but it was theirs home for nearly 80 years until 1991. And the long road away from, and eventually back to, that patch of ground, well, that's the heartbeat of the whole Wimbledon tale. But that's for later. For now they climbed slow and steady like a man in wellies up a greasy slope into the Athenian League, then the Isthmian in the 1930s. They started to look. Well, good. 4 titles in the decade, a trip to the FA Amateur Cup final. They kept at it through the 50s. Then hit a golden patch in the early 60s, 3 successive league wins from 61 to 64. Not bad for a side most people still thought of as a quiz answer. They were building something. These dons layer by layer. Quietly, patiently. Like a model railway made of bruised shins and muddy nets. And then came a moment. A proper Wembley moment. Though as moments go, this one had a forehead like a wrecking ball, capable of redirecting a small asteroid, let alone a football.
The FA Amateur Cup final, a competition now largely consigned to the sepia-toned archives of memory. Much like proper Bovril or the notion of a peaceful Sunday afternoon, Wimbledon lifted the trophy that day, and their centre forward, a chap by the name of Eddie Reynolds, well, he scored all 4 of their goals with his head, every single one, in a Wembley final. It's the sort of thing that sounds made up, isn't it? Like a tall tale told in a smoky club bar, next to a pint of mild and unopened bag of scampi fries, where the clock seems to have rusted to a standstill. But it happened. A 4-2 win over Sutton United, a feather in the cap and a proper badge of pride, stitched into the very fabric of the club's burgeoning mythos. This triumph for a non-league side was a significant cornerstone of the original club's pride. It was a moment of national recognition, a quiet declaration that even from the lower rungs, ambition could reach the grander stage. And while they couldn't have known it then, with the scent of liniment and victory still hanging in the Wembley air, this was the first half of a truly unique journey. The first chapter of a story that would one day see them achieve a rare double, securing both the FA Amateur Cup and its much grander professional cousin. But that, as they say, is a tale for another time, when the stars align just so, and a very different kind of chaos descends upon English football. But it was the 1974 Sevnifend FA Cup run that really flicks the national spotlight in their direction. Still a Southern League side back then, but they went on a proper footballing wonder. They became the first non-league team in the entire 20th century to beat a first division side away from home. Burnley at Turf Moor, a ground where even the clouds look like they've had a tough week. And then Leeds United, champions of England, Elland Road, held them to a goalless draw. They did a wall of blue and yellow frustration, forced a replay, though they lost that one. At Selhurst Park, mind you, as Plough Lane wasn't considered suitable. Not enough padded seats, probably, or prawn sandwiches. But that run, it gave them a reputation, giant killers, not with swords, but with sheer bloody-mindedness, and the occasional agricultural tackle domestically. They were too strong for their tier. 3 Southern League titles in a row, from 74 to 77. That kind of dominance tends to get noticed. Pushes you forward, like a supermarket trolley with one wonky wheel, and a mission.
And in 1977, the call came. Wimbledon were elected to the Football League for the 1977-78 season. This wasn't a case of automatic promotion, you understand, but a vote, a decision by the existing clubs to welcome them into the professional fold, taking the place of Workington, a changing of the guard. A northern town traded in for a slice of stubborn South London grit by democratic decree of the old guard. Ah yes, the Football League election system of yesteryear, a truly peculiar beast, wasn't it? Like a grand old manor house where entry wasn't based on simply proving your worth, but on gaining the favor of the current residents. You see, until 1986, there was no automatic promotion from non-league football into the Football League's bottom tier. Instead, The bottom four clubs of the fourth division, along with any ambitious non-league sides, had to apply for election or re-election at the league's annual general meeting. It was in essence a vote by the existing professional clubs on who they fancied rubbing shoulders with next season. Sometimes it felt more like an old pals act than a meritocracy, with clubs calling in favors and the status quo usually being maintained. So winning 3 Southern League titles, as Wimbledon did from 74 to 77, was indeed a colossal achievement, a thumpy declaration of intent. But it didn't guarantee them a seat at the table. It merely gave them a very strong case to present to the Football League's voting members. They had to put themselves forward, essentially asking, "Please, sirs, may we have some more football?" And the evidence suggests it wasn't a case of first-time lucky. Either reports from the time indicate that Wimbledon, despite their burgeoning success and that famous FA Cup run in 1974-75, had applied for Football League membership in both 1975 and 1976 and failed on each occasion. It took that third successive Southern League title in 1977, combined with the lingering positive glow of their giant-killing FA Cup exploits, and a geographically favourable location in southwest London, for the league members to finally cast enough votes in their favour. That year, Workington, a northern club, was the one voted out to make way. It was a competitive old game even off the pitch, where a club's fate could be decided not just by goals and points, but by the subtle art of persuasion and the alignment of distant political stars. A rather undignified end for one, and a hard-won entry for another, proving that sometimes even when you've done everything right on the field, the gatekeepers have their own peculiar set of rules. And then, well, what followed was neither expected nor entirely explainable. In just 9 seasons, they climbed from the 4th division to the first 9. That's one for every substitute you couldn't name, an unprecedented feat. Some would say, like teaching a Labrador to drive a steam engine Alan Batsford. And then Dario Gradi got the engine started with those initial promotions, and Dave Bassett oversaw the final jump to the top tier. By 1986, they were in the top flight. At one point, they were even top of the league. The actual first division above Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal, all of them. You wouldn't have believed it unless you saw it. And even then, you'd double-check the teletext. But Wimbledon, as ever, just got on with it. Shrugged, taped up their boots, and kicked the next ball. The Crazy Gang. Even now, the name rolls around like a loose ball in the 6-yard box, coined, or at least popularized, by the great John Motson during the 1988 FA Cup final commentary. It stuck like boot polish to white socks, and rightly so. Because this was no ordinary team, this was Wimbledon's wildest incarnation. A glorious mismatch of characters, chaos and commitment. A team that played football like it was a pub argument in motion. Dave Bassett built it, took the reins in 1981 and shaped not just a playing style, but an entire philosophy. Long ball, yes, but also long nights, practical jokes, psychological warfare, and an us against the world ethos that would have made a siege commander blush. As Bassett once famously said of his side, reflecting on their unique approach, we were the enemy of football, but we were very effective at being the enemy. Our Dave Bassett Harry to his mates, a name whispered with a mixture of reverence and slight unease in certain football circles. He was, without a doubt, the true architect of the Crazy Gang ethos. Took the helm in 1981, you see, and stayed until 1987. A good stretch in those days. A proper tenure, especially given the, shall we say, unconventional methods at play. Bassett wasn't a man for delicate tactical nuances or possession-based football that purred like a finely tuned Swiss watch. His style was direct, aggressive, built on sheer hard work and a rather uncompromising approach. It was famously described as work hard, play hard, tackle harder. This wasn't about out-passing opponents, it was about out-battling them, out-muscling them, and frankly, quite often out-intimidating them. He fostered a culture that pushed the boundaries of fair play, sometimes spilling over into decidedly robust, even dangerous, conduct on the pitch. Opponents often left the field with more than just a defeat in their pockets. Sometimes it was a long-term injury, a rather grim souvenir from a day out with the Dons. But it wasn't just on the pitch where Bassett's influence stamped itself. The dressing room under his guidance became legendary. Or perhaps infamous. It was a place where new recruits were expected to grow a backbone very quickly or dissolve as a man. Tales emerged in later years of a systemic brutality, of humiliating hazing rituals that could make a seasoned veteran weep. Terry Phelan, Rapalani, a fullback during that era, once spoke of seeing players physically break down and cry from the abuse. The dressing room was less a sanctuary and more a pressure cooker designed to forge a fierce, almost unbreakable bond amongst the core group, an us against the world mentality, but a considerable personal cost to those who couldn't adapt, or wouldn't. The story of teammates allegedly setting fire to Alan Cork's car bizarrely, in an attempt to get him a pay rise from Bassett, rather encapsulates the peculiar logic at play. It was madness, yes, but often with a strange, skewed purpose. And yet, it worked. Bassett's methods, as unconventional and controversial as they were, delivered astonishing results. He oversaw Wimbledon's meteoric rise through the Football League, managing the initial promotions that saw them climb from the 4th Division all the way to the 1st Division by 1986. He laid the foundations, built the machine, and instilled the very spirit that would propel them to their greatest glory. He departed before the FA Cup final, but the team that lifted that trophy, that was his team, forged in his image. A manager who demanded everything, and for a time got it all, leaving behind a legacy as complicated as a Gordian knot, but undeniably effective. And the players, well, they weren't just athletes. They were archetypes. Vinnie Jones, the poster boy, arrived in '84, tackled everything: opponents, teammates, tradition. He himself claimed in various interviews that the madness predated him. He just channeled it. John Feshanu, a bouncer in boots, muscular, menacing, and unstoppable on his day. Dave Bessem, the lighthouse in a maelstrom captain, goalkeeper and collector of calm amid carnage. Laurie Sanchez, quiet, steely, decisive, and as it turns out, fated. Dennis Wise, part Jack Russell, part wind-up merchant, all elbows and intent. Alan Cork, a goal-getter with the face of a PE teacher and the timing of a metronome. Terry Phelan, Wally Downs, who Vinnie Jones identified as an early leader and instigator of the culture. The list goes on. Each a character, each, in their own odd way, essential to the alchemy. If the crazy gang were a pub lock-in, Wally was the one who knew where the key was kept. And then came 1988, Wembley. May 14th, Wimbledon versus Liverpool. Now, understand this: Liverpool weren't just good, they were Imperial League champions, clinical, elegant. Their midfield moved like a murmuration of starlings. Wimbledon were not that. But on that Saturday afternoon, the stars tilted from the very first whistle. It was clear this wouldn't be a typical Liverpool coronation barely seconds after kickoff as the ball rolled towards the centre circle. Vinnie Jones launched himself into Liverpool's Steve McMahon. It wasn't just a tackle. It was a thunderbolt, a seismic statement delivered before the clock had barely stirred. Vinnie Jones himself later admitted in various interviews with publications like TalkSport that this moment was entirely premeditated. He'd studied Liverpool, pinpointing McMahon's early touch. He famously recounted, "I'd watched a video on Alan Hansen, or someone would knock the ball to McMahon who'd then let it come across him to open up so he could play it out the other side." The gamble, he mused, was that a referee facing a Wembley crowd of nearly 100,000 wouldn't dare send him off in the opening seconds. So when the ball came into him, Jones recalled, "I started running. I was about 30 yards away and I kept thinking, just open up. And he did. And I thought, Merry Christmas." Boom. He plainly stated in the Crazy Gang documentary that this tackle was planned weeks before, a raw declaration of, "Yeah, we don't give a shit." He even considered McMahon his only real rival for the hardest man in football accolade, a grudging nod of respect from the dark side of the game.
There was no yellow card, no warning. Just a collision that reverberated through Wembley and into the collective consciousness of football. Commentator Brian Moore described it as a nasty challenge, while John Watson called it the sort of challenge that Wimbledon are reputed to produce. Liverpool teammate John Aldridge later quipped that in the modern game, Jones could have been the quickest man ever to get sent off. It was a psychological strike, a defiant declaration of war that set the chaotic, uncompromising tone for the afternoon. It said, "We're here. We're not intimidated. And this isn't going to be easy for you." Of course, Steve McMahon, the recipient of this blunt instrument, has a rather different recollection in his autobiography. He suggested the tackle didn't worry me in the least, and Raleigh noted, "I didn't think Vinnie Jones had more than 6 kicks in the entire Wembley final. And 2 of them sent the ball into the stands. That was his only contribution." A wonderfully scathing rebuttal highlighting the subjective nature of impact, though. It must be noted McMahon later got his own back in a subsequent match, giving Jones a kick that required stitches, a testament to the enduring if peculiar rivalry between the two. The tackle was a psychological riposte, a first act of rebellion, and the signal of what was to come. From that moment, Wimbledon dictated terms. They weren't elegant. They were elemental. They denied Liverpool rhythm, snuffed out space, and ground them down. In the 37th minute, Dennis Wise curled in a free kick to perfection. At the near post, Laurie Sanchez rose like a secret and flicked a header into the net. 1-0, Wembley fell silent, then cracked into astonished applause. Liverpool were awarded a penalty shortly after, their chance to strike back. John Aldridge stepped up confidently. Dave Beasant, standing tall, guessed correctly. He dived low, saved it. Milestone moment, the first goalkeeper ever to save a penalty in the FA Cup final. That save, more than the goal, cracked Liverpool's resolve and ignited Wimbledon's belief. When the final whistle blew, it wasn't just a win. It was a declaration. Wimbledoners were FA Cup champions, mythmakers. They became only the 3rd club in English football history, and the only one in the 20th century to lift both the FA Cup and its amateur counterpart. Before them, Old Carthusians and the Royal Engineers, gentlemen amateurs from a different era, both their triumphs dating back to the 19th century. It puts Wimbledon's achievement in a strange and splendid light, like stumbling across a blacksmith, hammering steel on an anvil in the age of laser-cut alloys, a footballing relic but alive. Roaring, victorious, from plough fields to Wembley turf, from borrowed kits to silverware, from local lads to legends, a tale so unlikely it reads like folklore. The kind whispered across the bar, told by men who still believe in magic. But even in that golden hour, amid the cheers, the medals, the disbelief, Dave Bisant felt something shift, a silence behind the noise, a change in the air, the beginning of the end. He said that day was the beginning of the end. Everything changed after that. People looked at us different then, and our players became targets. He left that summer for Newcastle. Others followed. The gang dissolved, not with scandal, but with transfer letters, gently, quietly, inevitably. But for one radiant afternoon in May, Wimbledon stood at the summit, champions not just of a match, but of the improbable, the unloved, the unshaven, the unstoppable. Now then, the crazy gang's playing style. Notorious. It was work hard, play hard, tackle harder. That was the mantra. A creed carved in bruises and splinters. It pushed the boundaries of fair play, and sometimes it didn't so much push as shoulder charge them into the appetizing hoardings. Gary Stevens of Tottenham Hotspur. A quick, composed, elegant full-back, a true talent of his generation, even capped for England. His story, sadly, became a poignant illustration of the crazy gang's darker side. The challenge from Vinnie Jones during a league match in February 1988 was no ordinary tackle. It resulted in a severe knee injury, described by sports journalists and medical reports from the time as cruciate ligament damage, or at the very least, a shattered knee. And in those days, that was football's equivalent of a death sentence. Stevens, at the peak of his powers, underwent multiple operations. He fought to come back. But the pace, the consistency, gone, he drifted to Portsmouth, later to Australia. But the joy, the ease, it never returned. A promising career altered in an instant. A ripple effect of a single crunching moment. And off the pitch, the internal culture was just as uncompromising. Vinnie Jones himself said it was nuts when he arrived. Not metaphorically, just actually. Years later, in books and interviews and documentaries, the stories began to surface, tales of vicious beatings, systemic brutality, humiliating hazing rituals. There was the infamous handbagging, where players, new or simply unlucky, were beaten with rolled-up newspapers or literal handbags. Some whispered of a knotting ritual, where John Fashanu would headbutt newcomers as a grotesque greeting. Others were locked in shower cubicles, sent on nude runs in just boots and socks. Rituals designed not to humiliate for fun, but to break you down, then build you up in Wimbledon's image. As John Fashanu himself, in the Crazy Gang documentary, once candidly described. If you came to Wimbledon, you'd go naked in training sometimes. You'd be sent on a run. Just your boots and socks. It broke you or it made you. And Dennis Wise, in his autobiography, remembered the car pranks, recalling. You'd come out after training, and your car would be on bricks, or the tires were gone. It was just a laugh, but you learned fast. Never leave your keys lying around.
There are also reports of a peculiar toilet tax levied by senior players. Woe betide any new recruit who didn't contribute to the communal fund, for fear of what might then appear in their football boots. Sometimes disagreements or acts of defiance would escalate into impromptu boxing matches in the dressing room or on the training pitch. As Vinnie Jones reflected in one interview, we'd have proper fights in training sometimes, two men going at it no holds barred. It was about proving yourself. You knew where you stood afterwards. Even more chillingly, as a BBC Sport retrospective highlighted, players recounted initiation rituals involving physical blows with small hard objects. It's a grim test of mettle. New players were expected to grow a backbone quickly or dissolve as a man. Terry Phelan, who was there, put it plainly. I saw players cry, physically break down and cry.
The mass brawl during a match against Chelsea still echoes down the years. 21 players converged in the centre circle, letting fist-fly football turned into a full-blown street brawl pulled apart by frantic managers. No elegant penalties, just primal instinct. Then there were the bus driver pranks. One hapless driver, as chronicled by 442, found cardboard boxes taped over his head at 80 miles an hour. Another woke to hot fish batter plastered over his bald patch, a culinary assault. These were an ecosystem of mischief, fear, embarrassment, and an uneasy belonging woven into daily life. John Fashionu's locker room judo move still makes shoulders tighten. He reportedly threw a teammate like a rag doll, a demonstration of dominance blurring training and theatre more performance than tactic. Alan Cork's car was allegedly set alight by teammates, including Vinnie Jones, a bizarre mode to protest for a wage rise. Jones also recalled Fashanu physically brutalizing a new recruit, not in jest, but as dominance. But amidst it all, Caroline Braver, assistant physio, was the only woman in the dressing room. She joined in 1981, hired despite staff opposition to a woman in football. She called it a male Steentrinians. Once massaging a player, he began to pleasure himself. Her reply, "You need a hooker, not a physio." She walked off, earning quiet applause from coach Dong Hao. "Nice one, you handled that well." She treated injuries and isolation, tending to players mentally slipping, those cast aside by layoffs, wrestling silent battles with identity. She was a hidden sounding board. There wasn't any provision for mental health. You had to be strong the whole time, and people weren't. She provided space, privacy, listening, a form of care the club didn't understand it needed. On fake cup final day, she prepared ice towels for the Wembley heat. Unseen, essential. These episodes didn't erase the culture. They defined it, from brawls to battered bald patches, fiery cars to backstage assaults. Each act thickened the legend. They painted a world intoxicating and troubling, where camaraderie was forged with cruelty. Courage was measured by how loudly you laughed before a battery smash. Sam Hammam took over in 1919. The chaos became institutionalized. He once admitted nobody at the club knew how to behave. All of it, bruises, brawls, blazing cars, fed the myth, building a fearsome reputation, but it left questions about sportsmanship, discipline, humanity. It forged powerful bonds for those who thrived but excluded many, and by any modern standard, it was deeply problematic. Still, through violence, victories, and vanishing players, one thing endured: resilience from the club's 1910 collapse to its improbable rise. To that silver cup at Wembley, Wimbledon kept getting up. That spirit stitched into its fibers didn't just survive the crazy gang it endured. When everything else was taken, it lit the path back to AFC Wimbledon. All the way home.
After Bobby Gould, a manager who'd famously wrestled the FA Cup from Liverpool's grasping jaws, departed in 1990, Wimbledon found themselves in that most English of footballing predicaments, a state of mild, yet distant managerial churn. First came Ray Harford, who took over mid-1990 and guided Wimbledon to a commendable 7th place finish in the old First Division. A steady, determined effort, defying their stubbornly unstubbering reputation, like a stubborn weed blooming beautifully in an allotment. But by autumn 1991, the air around Plough Lane was thick with a growing uncertainty, a mist of internal disagreements, especially over the ground's looming fate, and these grey clouds eventually prompted his departure. This period, you see, is where the story of the great betrayal truly begins to intertwine with the club's fortunes on the pitch, like a particularly nasty bit of bindweed strangling a prize-winning marrow. The seeds of discontent were sown by the Taylor Report back in 1990 in the aftermath of the Hillsborough disaster. It landed with the solemnity of a papal bull mandating that all top-flight English clubs had to have all-seater stadiums, a concept as alien to some grounds as a Labrador driving a steam engine. Wimbledon's historic home, Plough Lane, with its charmingly archaic terracing and limited room for expansion. It simply wasn't suitable for these new all-seater diktats. It was an external factor, yes, a bureaucratic tremor, but for Wimbledon it became a critical turning point, the first crack in the club's very foundations. Peter with tenure that autumn-winter was, by comparison, as brief and turbulent as a seaside fling in a hurricane. 13 games, 1 win, and little cohesion. Like a committee meeting run by angry toddlers. It signaled, if nothing else, that Wimbledon needed more than charisma. They needed consistency. So in 1991, Wimbledon FC packed up its modest kit bags and its slightly bewildered expression and moved out of Plough Lane. They entered into a ground share agreement with local rivals, Crystal Palace, at Selhurst Park, 6 miles east of Plough Lane. A journey that for some loyalists felt like crossing the Atlantic on a unicycle. It was presented as a temporary arrangement. You see, a mere interlude, while the club, under chairman Sam Hammam at the time, looked for a new site in southwest London. But this temporary solution, it stretched on for more than a decade, and slowly but surely, like a damp patch spreading across a ceiling, it started to fuel fan frustration. It started to detach the club, bit by bit, from its geographical and spiritual roots in Wimbledon. A slow, quiet amputation of its very soul.
The elusive, almost mythical stability arrived in January 1992 with Joe Kinnear. He stayed until June 1999. An almost unheard of run for Wimbledon, a feat of endurance that defied the very laws of footballing gravity. He steered them into the inaugural Premier League, a glossy new ocean full of gleaming yachts. And despite sailing with limited funds and no home ground, having left Plough Lane behind in 1991, he kept them afloat year after year. Kinnear, a man with a gaze that could strip paint and a voice like a gravel pit, is widely credited with preserving the stubborn, uncompromising Wimbledon spirit. Even after the crazy gang's heyday had passed, he adapted, yes, because even a raging river must occasionally navigate a bend. But he didn't dilute. His Wimbledon was still gloriously awkward, still obdurate, still the team no one in their right mind, or indeed their designer tracksuit, truly relished playing. They were a fly in the ointment, a burr under the saddle, a pebble in the shoe of the Premier League's grand aspirations, and they could still conjure a shock, a sudden, glorious act of defiance. The pinnacle, famously dumping reigning Premier League champions Manchester United out of the FA Cup in a fourth-round replay at Selhurst Park in 1997. A moment of exquisite working-class ballet, proof that the old magic still flickered, a stubborn pilot light in the gathering gloom. During this period, however, Sam Hammam's search for a new stadium proved to be protracted and ultimately fruitless, at least within the local area. And during this time, he made a controversial suggestion, one that would become an early, alarming warning sign like a distant siren growing louder. He proposed moving the team much further afield. He even suggested Dublin, Ireland. These proposals, they showed an owner's willingness to consider severing the club's deep community ties, a hint of what was to come, a shadow lengthening over the pitch. Then a pivotal moment arrived in 1997. Hammam sold 80% of his shares in Wimbledon to two Norwegian businessmen, Kjell Inge Ruck and Bjørn Rune Gjelsten. And the very next year, 1998, Hammam sold Plough Lane itself. For supermarket redevelopment, that act to cut the club's last physical tie to its historic home made any return to the original site impossible. And it drastically increased the pressure to find a new viable stadium solution, like a tightening noose. But in 1999, Kinnear, the sturdy hand on the tiller, stepped down due to ill health. With him, the steady backbone left too. What followed was more uncertain, a ship adrift in a rising tide. Sam Hammam sold his remaining stake to the Norwegian owners in February, just months before the club dropped out of the Premier League. It was as if he sensed the impending structural collapse and quickly made for the lifeboats. And so, into this simmering cauldron stepped Egil Drillo Olsen, the former Norway national coach. By rights, the appointment had pedigree. But the new Norwegian shareholders who had taken control in 1997 brought in Olsen and a different approach to player recruitment. Some felt this quietly, sadly diluted the very Wimbledon spirit that had been so central to their identity. Olsen lasted less than a season, overseeing a collapse culminating in relegation, a tenure that felt like a nightmare, a finely complex mechanism attempting to operate a blunt instrument, with predictably lamentable results. He was gone faster than a forgotten umbrella on a rainy day. Terry Burton, longtime coach, tried to steady the ship as caretaker, but to no avail. Wimbledon were relegated at the end of the 1999-2000 season, after 14 years at the top table. A fall that felt both sudden and long overdue, like a grand old oak finally succumbing to the weight of its own centuries. The football gods, it seemed, had merely been biding their time. And then came Milton Keynes, a new town. You see, a place of roundabouts and pristine planning about 56 miles north of Wimbledon. Its development corporation had long identified it as a potential host for a top-flight football team, a blank canvas for sporting ambition. And Pete Winkleman, a music producer and property developer with the bold vision of a Viking raider, had concrete plans to build just such a stadium there, part of a larger retail and leisure development. He was actively looking for a club to become its anchor tenant, a flagship to his retail armada. A vision, some might say, as subtle as a foghorn in a library. So in 2001, under new chairman Charles Koppel and those Norwegian owners, Wimbledon FC announced its intention: relocation to Milton Keynes. The club's hierarchy put forward their justifications, a perfectly rehearsed, glossy PR presentation of necessity, financial survival,
claiming no viable local stadium existed, and the glittering opportunity in Milton Keynes. They even promised preservation of identity, history, colors, name, traditions, with subsidized travel. A grand, almost fantastical vision, promising to transplant the spirit like a bonsai tree, expecting it to flourish in unfamiliar soil. One might as well try to teach a badger to play the violin. These justifications, however, were met with almost universal outrage, disbelief from the loyal fan base and much of the wider football community. For the supporters, it was an act of profound betrayal, the theft of their club's very soul and heritage, and a dangerous step towards an American-style franchising model, previously unheard of in English football, a concept as unpalatable as lukewarm tea served in a Wellington boot. The Wimbledon Independent Supporters Association, WISA, spearheaded a determined, professional and passionate campaign against the move that organized vocal fan resistance. A collective roar that vibrated through the foundations of the game became a defining feature of the whole controversy. Finally, Stuart Murdoch arrived, finding himself managing not just a team, but a crisis. He was the man on the touchline as the club entered its most controversial chapter. The relocation to Milton Keynes. A man caught between history and ownership, like a figure in a classical tragedy, trying to find a decent cuppa amidst the unfolding drama.
The Football League. To their credit, they initially refused permission for the move. They recognized the widespread opposition, the potential damage to the league's very integrity, but the club appealed, and that led to the Football Association appointing an independent, three-man commission to make the final ruling. Steve Stride, a director at Aston Villa, Alan Turvey, chairman of the Ryman League, and Raj Parker, an FA legal advisor, a panel of sober faces tasked with an impossible moral geometry problem. And then on May 28, 2002, the commission delivered its verdict, voting 2-1 in favor, allowing Wimbledon FC to relocate to Milton Keynes. Alan Turvey, a man who perhaps understood the very marrow of football, is widely believed to have been the dissenting voice. The commission's 67-page report outlined their rationale, a grand tapestry of corporate logic primarily. They argued it was better to let Wimbledon move than to let the club die, as the owners had claimed it would go into liquidation if the move wasn't sanctioned, like a desperate surgeon choosing amputation over total collapse. They also asserted, with a confidence that bordered on the surreal, that Milton Keynes provides a suitable and deserving opportunity in its own right where none exists in South London. And astonishingly, endorsed an earlier Football League arbitration panel's view that it should be in the interests of football as a whole that major new stadia are encouraged where there is an untapped demand for Major League Football, such as in new towns, even if it meant bypassing the somewhat tortuous route of climbing the football pyramid organically. It was a sentence that dripped with the antiseptic odor of business plans, utterly devoid of the mud and magic of non-league struggle. This decision, it was unprecedented. It sent shockwaves through English football like a rogue wave hitting a perfectly calm harbour critics. They lambasted the commission for seemingly accepting the club's financial claims without sufficient scrutiny, and for setting a dangerous precedent that many feared would encourage the franchising of football clubs, undermining that fundamental principle that clubs should be intrinsically linked to their local communities and earn their progress on merit. The commission itself, they even stated in their report that they had not set a precedent and that franchising was bad. A claim that many observers found to be intellectually weak and utterly contradictory to the very nature of their ruling. Like a magician insisting the rabbit wasn't pulled from the hat, even as it sat blinking on the table. The
the FA Commission's decision, while perhaps intended to resolve a difficult situation, inadvertently became a landmark moment, one that fueled the modern fan ownership movement. It showed supporters across the country just how vulnerable their clubs were to commercial decisions that simply disregarded fan sentiment, disregarded traditional football values.
That unique problem narrative, the one the owners used to justify the move to Milton Keynes, a flimsy curtain drawn across a gaping hole, it also came under scrutiny. They presented the relocation as an unavoidable consequence of dire financial and stadium predicaments. But evidence later suggested that alternative solutions, perhaps a more modest redevelopment of Plough Lane or a site within Merton, might well have been feasible. This was particularly highlighted by a reported statement from one of the Norwegian owners. After the decision, he indicated a willingness to release £40 million to assist the move to Milton Keynes, a sum significantly greater than what might have been needed for a local solution, and one that starkly contrasted with the earlier claims of poverty, like a man complaining of starvation while sitting atop a mountain of sandwiches. The subsequent actions of AFC Wimbledon supporters who, through years of dedicated fundraising and clever schemes like the Plough Lane Bond, managed to fund a new stadium back in Merton. Well, it demonstrated a level of long-term financial commitment and creative problem-solving that the original club's owners seemed unwilling, or perhaps unable, to undertake for a solution in Wimbledon. It suggests, doesn't it, that the ownership's definition of viability was perhaps more focused on the specific commercial opportunities in Milton Keynes, rather than exhausting all possibilities to remain in their home borough. They underestimated the profound long-term commitment and the financial capacity of a dedicated fan base when mobilized. The fans, in the end, they proved that what the ownership had deemed impossible, a sustainable future for Wimbledon football in Wimbledon, was, in fact, achievable through a different model, through sustained collective effort. The beautiful, quiet triumph of the human spirit over the spreadsheet. That whole era, especially post-Kinnear, was marked by uncertainty. Relegation followed, new owners brought foreign managers, new methods, new players. A shift which many argue broke the Wimbledon spirit. The heart, the shared grit, the chaos, the homemade magic felt lost. And for the first time in decades, the Dons looked ordinary, unsteady, unrecognizable, a perfectly functioning but utterly soulless machine. The FA Commission's decision was met with widespread condemnation, not only from the devastated Wimbledon fans, but also from large sections of the broader football community who saw it as a betrayal of the sport's traditions. For Wimbledon supporters, the feeling was one of acute loss. Their club, with its rich history and deep local roots, had been effectively stolen and transplanted, treated like a disposable franchise rather than a cherished community institution. In response, many fans boycotted Wimbledon FC's remaining home matches at Selhurst Park during the 2002-2003 season, leading to drastically dwindling attendances. One league game reportedly drew a crowd of just 849, the lowest ever for a Division 1 match.
This visible display of dissent underscored the depth of alienation felt by the traditional fan base. A silent scream echoing through empty seats.
But it's worth remembering, even in those final years, the echoes were still there. The spirit was flickering a stubborn ember beneath the grey ashes, not yet extinguished. Just waiting for a new home. Amidst the despair and anger, a spark of defiance ignited like a single firework against the night sky. The FA Commission's ruling, while intended to save Wimbledon FC by allowing its relocation, effectively killed the club in the eyes of the vast majority of its loyal supporters. Almost immediately, these disaffected fans resolved that if their club was to be taken away, they would build a new one in its place, one that would remain true to the heritage and community of Wimbledon. This resolution led directly to the formation of AFC Wimbledon in May and June 2002, a phoenix club rising from the ashes of what they saw as the great betrayal, unmoored. And soon, as we'll come to, gloriously, defiantly recognizable once more. The story of AFC Wimbledon's ascent from the 9th tier of English football to the professional leagues. It's one of the most remarkable tales in modern football, truly marked by relentless ambition, unwavering fan support, and a whole string of memorable triumphs. A proper, sprawling epic, played out not on some grand stage, but on muddy pitches and impact, hopeful stands. The formal approval of Wimbledon FC's relocation, that date, May 28, 2002, that was the final catalyst. That very evening, a determined group of supporters, folk like Chris Stewart, Mark Jones, Trevor Williams, they gathered at the Fox and Grapes pub, right there on Wimbledon. Common to work out what on earth they were going to do, no right of appeal against the FA's decision, you see. The consensus was clear, the only viable option was to start a new club from scratch, one that would truly represent the fans and the community. Just 2 days later, May 30th, 2002, the idea was formally proposed at a packed meeting of the Wimbledon Independent Supporters Association. The proposal to create a new community-based club named AFC Wimbledon. It was overwhelmingly endorsed and an immediate appeal for funds was launched. Already active in campaigning against the move, played an instrumental role, mobilizing the fan base, providing the organizational springboard for this brave new venture. Central to this rebirth, this fresh start, was the Dons Trust. This democratic supporters trust, it had been officially formed earlier that year, on February 10th, 2002, following a vote by over 1,200 fans crammed into the Wimbledon Theatre. More than 750 folk joined the trust that very night, and a significant sum of money was raised, a clear demonstration of the collective will of the supporters. The trust's initial purpose, you see, was to represent its supporters, to try and influence the board of Wimbledon FC against the relocation. When those efforts ultimately failed with the FA's sanctioning of the move, the Dons Trust held an emergency meeting, and it was constitutionally agreed to support the creation of AFC Wimbledon.
The Dons Trust, then, it became the legal and ethical backbone of the new club. It was established as a not-for-profit industrial and provident society, ensuring that AFC Wimbledon would be wholly supporter-owned, run on a democratic, one-member, one-vote basis. The trust committed to strengthening the voice of supporters in all club decisions, and to fostering strong links between the club and the local community of Wimbledon and its surrounding areas. The formation of the Dons Trust was even aided by Supporters Direct, an organization set up to help fans gain influence in the running of their clubs. It showed AFC Wimbledon's place within a nascent but growing movement for greater fan involvement in football governance, the Dons Trust. It provided an effective and enduring model for how supporters can not only resist unpopular decisions by club owners but can take ultimate responsibility for their club's future. Its success in establishing and guiding AFC Wimbledon, it served as an inspiration. A practical example for other supporter trusts and the wider fan ownership movement, not just in the UK, but further afield. The founding principles and ethos of AFC Wimbledon were very clear. They emerged, you see, as a direct, defiant reaction to the perceived failings and the rather cold commercial motivations of the old club's ownership, and to the quite frankly egregious manner in which that relocation was handled. This wasn't merely a business plan, but a philosophy written in the very spirit of grassroots football, a counter-manifesto to the corporate spreadsheet. Firstly, they declared themselves a community-based club deeply rooted, irrevocably dedicated to its local community. Like an ancient oak refusing to be transplanted, its roots too entangled with the very earth around it. Then came the very bedrock, fan ownership and democratic control. The ultimate authority would rest, not with distant fleeting figures in boardrooms, but with the very supporters themselves, through the Dons Trust. This was to be a permanent, ironclad guarantee ensuring the club could never again be taken away from them against their collective will, a grand, binding contract penned in shared tears and unwavering loyalty. Furthermore, there was the solemn pledge for the preservation of heritage. AFC Wimbledon was forged, not as something entirely new, but as the undeniable spiritual successor to the original Wimbledon FC. It was to carry forward its history, its cherished traditions, and that indefinable yet potent Wimbledon spirit. Like an old family heirloom, lovingly polished and handed down, rather than sold off for parts. And finally, a quiet, almost radical commitment to ethical standards and financial prudence. The club committed to operating with honesty, with transparency, and with sound financial management, aiming always for solvency and sustainability. This was to be a bastion of sensible housekeeping in a world often lost to speculative gambling. A clear, steady beacon against the wild, frothy seas of modern football finance.
The creation of AFC Wimbledon in the summer of 2002. It was an act of defiance, certainly of passion, undoubtedly. But it also presented immense practical challenges. Imagine it building a club from absolutely nothing. First hurdle, finding a league. The new season was fast approaching. You see, AFC Wimbledon successfully applied, and they were accepted into the Premier Division of the Combined Counties League, the 9th tier of English football for the 2002-03 season. Starting that lowdown, it truly underscored the monumental task that lay ahead if they were to ever reclaim a significant status in the game. Then assembling a squad. This is one of the most iconic episodes, I think, in their formation. The Wimbledon Common trials. No existing squad, remember. So the club held open trials on Wimbledon Common itself, June 29th, 2002. An extraordinary event. It attracted 230 hopeful players, from experienced non-league campaigners to ambitious youngsters, all eager to be part of this unique story. And from those trials, the club's inaugural squad was chosen: Terry Eames,
the club's first manager, he later admitted he was initially convinced the sheer number of trialists must have been some sort of wind-up. But holding those trials on Wimbledon Common, it wasn't just practical. It was deeply symbolic. Wimbledon Common was the original playing location of Wimbledon Old Centrals back in 1889. So, this event, it represented a return to the club's very roots, a literal fresh start on the same ground where the Wimbledon football story had begun over a century earlier. And the open nature of the trials, it embodied the new club's community-focused, inclusive ethos, a stark contrast to the often closed-off world of professional football recruitment. It was a reclaiming of heritage in a very tangible, very public way. Securing a ground, a new club needs a home, doesn't it? AFC Wimbledon initially entered into a ground-sharing arrangement with Kingstonian FC to play their home fixtures at Kings Meadow in the neighbouring Royal Borough of Kingston upon Thames. Not in Merton, no, but it provided a crucial base of operations. But the Dons Trust members, they recognized the importance of stability of control over their own home ground. So in March 2003, they voted to pursue the purchase of the lease for Kings Meadow. And by June 2003, after a successful fundraising effort that raised £2.4 million, the lease was secured. The club was officially unveiled on June 13, 2002, at a packed Wimbledon community centre to eager fans and the media. Terry Ames, the first manager, a former Wimbledon FC player himself, was introduced. The new play-in strip in the traditional royal blue and yellow, and a club badge based on the crest of the original Wimbledon FC, featuring the double-headed eagle of local legend, a powerful symbolic moment of rebirth, a clear statement of intent to carry on the legacy of Wimbledon football.
Fundraising, the financial commitment of the fan base, it was evident from the very start. Significant funds had already been raised at that initial Dons Trust formation meeting in February 2002. Chris Stewart, one of the leading figures in the club's formation, he'd initially estimated they'd need around £15,000 to fund AFC Wimbledon's first campaign. In the end, through season ticket deposits, donations, other early initiatives, they raised approximately £80,000. That immediate and generous financial backing, it was crucial for navigating those initial challenges, for establishing a football club from absolutely nothing. They started their competitive life, these new Dons, in the Premier Division of the Combined Counties League under Terry Ames, as we heard their first ever game. A pre-season friendly against Sutton United back on July 10th, 2002. They lost 4-0. A humble beginning, perhaps. But it was watched by an astonishing crowd, mind you, 4,657 people. A clear signal, a trumpet blast almost, of the immense pent-up support the new club already commanded. A crowd that could swallow some league. One gates whole. In that debut season, 2002-03, the Dons finished a highly credible third. Just missed out on promotion, despite a strong end to the season that saw them win their final 11 league fixtures. Kevin Cooper was the top scorer, with 37 goals, an almost comical tally. The 2003-04 season. That was a season of almost unblemished success, a golden ribbon unfurling across the calendar. Though it did see a managerial change, a little ripple in the otherwise serene pond. Terry Ames was suspended in February 2004, then sacked a few days later.
For misconduct, assistant manager. Nick English took charge immediately, and under English, the team absolutely stormed to the Combined Counties League Championship, finishing with an extraordinary unbeaten league record. 42 wins, 4 draws from 46 games, scoring a staggering 180 goals in the process, as if the net itself was a bottomless pit of delight. Kevin Cooper, prolific again, netted 53 goals. The league title was even complemented by victory in the Combined Counties League Premier Challenge Cup, completing a memorable double. And during this period, AFC Wimbledon set a new record, a little statistical quirk for the ages. The longest unbeaten run of league matches in English senior football, 78 consecutive league games without defeat. Between February 2003 and December 2004. That immediate success, that remarkable unbeaten run, it powerfully demonstrated the club's ambition, a quiet, furious hum of intent, and the fervent support that propelled it, even from the lowest, muddiest rungs of the football ladder, a truly unstoppable force, propelled by pure, unadulterated willpower. They also claimed the Combined Counties League Premier Challenge Cup. In 2003-04, an early sign of things to come, and the Surrey Senior Cup followed in 2004-05, adding quiet treasures to their growing hoard. And they even claimed the supporters. Direct Trust Cup 3 times over the years. A rather fitting piece of silverware, one might say.
Promotion took them into the Isthmian League Division 1 for the 2004-05 season, under manager Dave Anderson, who'd taken over from Nick English, and the Dons kept climbing like a particularly determined squirrel up a particularly tall oak. Won the Division 1 title at the first attempt, securing a second successive promotion. Richard Butler was top scorer with 24 goals. They also lifted the Surrey Senior Cup again. More silverware accumulating like quiet treasures in a forgotten chest. The step up to the Isthmian League Premier Division that proved a bit more challenging, as if the footballing gods decided they'd had enough of such relentless upward mobility. In 2005-06 they finished 4th, but were defeated in the playoffs. Shane Smeltz top scored that season. The next 2006-07, another 5th place finish, another playoff disappointment. The machine, it seemed, had hit a temporary snag, a pebble in the finely tuned gears. After that season, Terry Brown was appointed manager in May 2007. His arrival, it marked a new and highly successful phase for the club. The new mechanic had arrived, it seemed. In Brown's first season, 2007-08, AFC Wimbledon finished 3rd in the Isthmian League Premier Division. And this time, they navigated the playoffs, successfully beat Hornchurch in the semi-final, then triumphed 2-1 over Stainstown in a hard-fought final, earning promotion to the Conference South. Stephen Ferguson was top scorer with a relatively modest 10 goals, suggesting a strong team effort, a testament to collective will over individual brilliance. Key players during these Isthmian League promotions included stalwarts like Sam Hetton and Anthony Howard, men who knew the lower leagues like the back of their hand and played them with the heart of a lion. And under Terry Brown's astute management, AFC Wimbledon continued their remarkable climb. The 2008-09 season in the Conference South, another triumph. The Dons spent most of the season near the top, eventually finished as champion, securing promotion to the Conference Premier, what's now the National League, the highest tier of non-league football, the promotion clinching match. A 3-0 victory over St. Albans City on April 25, 2009. Set a new attendance record of 4,722 at Kings Meadow. This stadium, striker John Main was instrumental. Top scorer with an impressive 33 goals.
Danny Kedwell was another key player, men carving their names into the very fabric of the new club's history. Their first season in the Conference Premier 2009-10, they consolidated their position with a respectable 8th place finish. Danny Kedwell was top scorer, with 21 goals, a beacon of consistency in the choppy waters of non-league.
And then the Tweeters in the 10-11 season. This was to be the culmination of their non-league odyssey. AFC Wimbledon finished second in the Conference Premier, securing a place in the promotion playoffs. After navigating the semi-finals, they faced Luton Town in the final May 21st, 2011. At the City of Manchester Stadium, now the Etihad. A tense, goalless 120 minutes where the air was so thick with nerves you could have cut it with a butter knife. Promotion to the Football League. It came down to a dramatic penalty shootout, that most cruel yet glorious of footballing finales. Goalkeeper Seb Brown, he became the hero, saving 2 Luton penalties like a man swatting away persistent flies before AFC Wimbledon's top scorer, Danny Kedwell, coolly converted the winning spot kick to seal a 4-3 shootout victory. A moment of sublime, unruffled calm amidst the storm. This monumental achievement, it marked their entry into the Football League just 9 years after their formation from scratch, fulfilling an ambitious 10-year target, a year ahead of schedule. It was a moment of immense pride, of raw emotion for the fans. The ones who had rebuilt their club, bringing a Wimbledon name back to the professional league structure. A grand, impossible dream made real by sheer bloody-minded perseverance. AFC Wimbledon's entry into the Football League in 2011, a new chapter bringing fresh challenges and further opportunities to etch their name into football history. The landscape changed, you see, but the stubborn heart remained. Those initial years in League Two, they were about consolidation. Mostly Terry Brown, he remained manager for the start of their Football League journey, guided them to a 16th place finish. And the 2011 12 season, Jack Midson top scored with 18 league goals. Brown left in September 2012. And after a brief caretaker spell, another former Wimbledon FC player, Neil Ardley, was appointed manager in October 2011. Ardley's first season, 2012-13. A dramatic one, he steered the club to safety from relegation on the very final day, finishing 20th. Jack Midson again top scorer, 12 goals. The 2013-14 season, another 20th place finish after a 3-point deduction. Mind you, for fielding an ineligible player, a cruel twist of the bureaucratic knife. A 15th place finish followed in 2014-15 Adebayo Akinfenwa. A proper character, a force of nature in human form, leading the scoring charts with 13 goals. It was during this period, in 2017, that the long-held dream of returning to their spiritual home truly began to take concrete shape. The club identified the site of the Wimbledon Greyhound Stadium, just 200 yards from the original plough lane, as the preferred location for a new home. The scent of destiny, perhaps, carried on the wind. In 2013, AFC Wimbledon, in collaboration with a developer and a housing association, announced a joint bid for the redevelopment of the Greyhound Stadium site. An ambitious master plan designed by architects, it included not only a new football stadium, but also over 600 residential properties, retail spaces, a squash and fitness club, and other community facilities. After a lengthy planning process, Bedtime Council unanimously approved the plans on December 10th, 2015. A landmark decision met with jubilation by the club's supporters, like a long-awaited summer shower, the return to Plough Lane.
It wasn't merely about constructing a new venue. It was about re-establishing the club at the very heart of its community and fulfilling a promise. Made nearly 2 decades earlier, a promise kept, against all the odds. The 2015-16 season that proved to be another landmark under Neil Ardley, AFC Wimbledon finished 7th in league, 2 securing a playoff spot, a golden ticket to the lottery of Wembley. They overcame Accrington Stanley in a tense semi-final 3-2 on aggregate with Adebayo Akinfenwa, scoring a crucial extra-time goal in the second leg of bulldozer with ballet shoes that set up a playoff final against Plymouth Argyle at Wembley on May 30th, 2016. In front of nearly 58,000 fans, a sea of hopeful faces, a proper cathedral-like atmosphere. Goals from Lyle Taylor, his 23rd of the season, a clinical finish, and a late penalty from the iconic Adebayo Akinfenwa in the 11th minute of injury time. A moment of almost surreal calm, and the storm sealed a famous 2-0 victory. This was AFC Wimbledon's 6th promotion since their formation in 2002, elevating them to League One, the 3rd tier of English football for the first time in their history. Key players in that promotion campaign included Lyle Taylor, Akinfenwa goalkeeper, Keller Rose captain Barry Fuller, Callum Kennedy, Paul Robinson, Darius Charles, Jake Reeves, Andy Barsham and Tom Elliott, a collective of gladiators performing miracles. AFC Wimbledon spent 6 seasons in League One, a proper extended stay at a higher table. Their highest finish was 15th in their debut to 2016-17 season. Neil Ardley remained manager until November 2018. He was succeeded by another former Wimbledon FC hero, Wally Downs, December 2019 to October 2018, who masterminded a remarkable escape from relegation in the 2018-19 season, pulling them from the jaws of the abyss with a mixture of grit and tactical nous. It was during this period too that the journey to build the new Plough Lane Stadium truly stands as a powerful testament to the sheer dedication and the rather astonishing financial commitment of AFC Wimbledon's fan base, with the club being fan-owned. Traditional large-scale private investment wasn't the primary funding route. Instead, a series of innovative and supporter-driven initiatives were launched, like small, persistent streams carving a path through solid rock. An initial trunk-fronting campaign was announced in 2019, aiming to raise at least £2 million to contribute towards the construction of an initial scaled-down version of the stadium. That target was successfully met by August 2019, the quiet triumph of collective will over corporate skepticism. However, in November 2019, a significant funding shortfall emerged. £11 million, a gaping chasm threatening the completion of a project as envisioned. Faced with this daunting challenge, the club and the Dons' trust, they turned once again to the supporters, like a tired traveller seeking solace from the nearest familiar face.
The response was the Plough Lane Bond Scheme, a groundbreaking initiative. It allowed fans and well-wishers to invest directly in the stadium's future. The initial bond issue was a phenomenal success, raising over £5.6 million, making it the largest football bond ever issued in the UK at that time. A second tranche of bonds followed, raising a further £4.1 million, with the scheme closing in October 2020, bringing the total raised through bonds to an impressive £9.79 million. A financial feat achieved by the countless small contributions of the faithful bondholders were offered various options upon maturity, including gifting their investment to the club or the Dons' trust, converting their bonds into shares in the club's holding company, rolling them over into new 5 or 10-year bonds, or redeeming them for cash. The generosity of the bondholders was truly remarkable,
A significant number chose to roll over or convert their bonds, substantially reducing the club's repayment burden by June 2025. It was projected that the total bond debt would have been reduced by over £1.6 million, standing at approximately £8 million. A testament to loyalty that transcends mere investment. The final piece of the financial puzzle was secured in May 2020, when local businessman and AFC Wimbledon supporter Nick Robertson made a key investment, ensuring that all construction contracts could be signed and the stadium completed. The entire stadium funding process stands as a prime example of fan power, unwavering commitment, and creative financial solutions, all driven by that profound desire to bring AFC Wimbledon home. A testament to the power of a dream, backed by every penny, every spare moment of a dedicated populace. The path to the new plough lane, it was far from smooth, fraught with numerous challenges and significant delays that truly tested the resolve of the club and its supporters like a particularly long and arduous trek up a very steep hill. Although planning permission was granted in late 2015, groundbreaking didn't occur until 2019. A delay of several years from initial projections, a frustrating crawl rather than a confident stride. Site clearance and enabling works finally began on March 16, 2018. The stadium's opening was initially planned for the summer of 2019. But this was successively pushed back to late 2019 or early 2020. And then further delayed, partly due to those funding shortfalls we mentioned and the sheer complexities of the build, to late October 2020. These delays meant that AFC Wimbledon had to start their 2020-2021 league season playing home games at Queen's, Park Rangers, Key and Prince Foundation Stadium, Loftus Road. Not ideal, to say the least, to be a guest in someone else's house. When your own is finally being built, those funding shortfalls, identified in late 2019, they posed a serious threat to the project's completion, forcing the club to consider scaling down the stadium or seeking external equity investment that might have diluted fan ownership. A bitter pill indeed. But the successful Plough Lane bond issue, that was critical in overcoming this hurdle, a lifeline thrown at the very last moment.
The final stages of construction and the initial period, they were also impacted by the global COVID-19 pandemic, which brought its own set of logistical and financial pressures. A final, almost theatrical challenge. The perseverance shown in navigating these numerous obstacles, it further highlighted the extraordinary resilience of AFC Wimbledon and its dedicated supporter base. A collective sigh of relief earned through years of tireless effort. Subsequent managers included Glenn Hodges, Mark Robinson, and Mark Bowen, notable top scorers during that league. One period were Lyle Taylor, Tom Elliott, and Joe Pigot, who bagged 15 league goals in Team Fa, 18-19, and 20-20-2020. Marcus Force and Jack Rudoni too, bright sparks in challenging times. Unfortunately, the 21-22 season ended in disappointment. The club finishing 23rd, relegated back to league. To a temporary stumble perhaps, a moment of reflection in the long, arduous journey. After nearly 30 years since Wimbledon FC last played a home game in the borough of Merton, a generation.
Almost AFC Wimbledon officially returned to Plough Lane on November 3rd, 2020, a date etched into the very soul of the club. The new stadium, known for sponsorship reasons as the Cherry Red Record Stadium, a continuation of the sponsorship from their Kings Meadow ground, hosted its first competitive match, a 2-2 draw against Doncaster Rovers in League. One AFC Wimbledon striker, Joe Pigott, had the honour of scoring the first goal for the home side. At the new venue, Tranley, due to national COVID-19 restrictions in place at the time, no fans were able to attend this historic opening match, a bittersweet moment for the thousands who had worked and waited so long for this day, like a grand celebration where the guests couldn't be there. The stadium opened with an initial capacity of 9,215, comprising a permanent West Stand seating, 4,267 spectators, incorporating hospitality areas and club offices, with the other three sides constructed as semi-permanent stands to allow for future phased expansion. The ground has planning permission for an eventual capacity of up to 20,000, a promise of future growth. The first match with fans in attendance was a friendly against Liverpool's under-23 side on May 18th, with 2,000 supporters present as part of a test event. The first competitive match with a capacity crowd was on August 14th, 2021. A thrilling 3-3 draw against Bolton Wanderers in League won a proper welcome home. The significance of this return to Plough Lane, it simply cannot be overstated. It represented the very fulfillment of a dream, the culmination of a 30-year aspiration for many Wimbledon fans to see their club play in its spiritual home borough once more, a direct and powerful link to the original Plough Lane, like finding a long-lost key that still fits the lock. The stadium itself stands as a symbol of fan power, a brick and mortar testament to what can be achieved through collective fan action, determination, and community spirit.
Built against the odds and largely funded by the supporters themselves, it's a monument to stubborn belief. It also serves as a crucial foundation for the future, this new modern stadium providing a vital platform for AFC Wimbledon's future growth, offering significantly enhanced matchday revenue opportunities, improved facilities for players and fans, and a more attractive proposition for commercial partners. And finally, it's a true community hub. Designed from the outset to be more than just a football ground, Plough Lane taught facilities for wider community use, reinforcing the club's unwavering commitment to being a central part of life in Merton, a beating heart for its locality. The new Plough Lane Stadium is, therefore, far more than just a football venue. It is a physical manifestation of the ideals upon which AFC Wimbledon was founded. Its challenging construction, its innovative fan-led funding, and its intended role as a vibrant community asset, they are all direct reflections of the club's unique identity and the unwavering commitment of its supporters to bring their club home on their own terms. A beautiful, quiet defiance made visible in concrete and steel, following that relegation back to League. Johnny Jackson was appointed manager in May 2022. The 2022-23 season was challenging. The Dons finished 21st, narrowly avoiding a further relegation. Ali Al-Hamadi top scored with 10 goals after joining mid-season. But Jackson then oversaw a strategic rebuild of the squad in the summer of 23, bringing in key acquisitions. Josh Neville, Ryan Johnson, Omar Bugiel on free transfers alongside defensive stalwart Joe Lewis.
and the return of fan favorite Jake Reeves. A quiet, considered revolution. This rebuild, it paid dividends in the 2020-2024 season. AFC. Wimbledon finished a much-improved 10th Ali Al-Hamadi before a January transfer and Omar Bougiel joint top scorers with 13 league goals each. The pieces of the puzzle were finally clicking into place. The momentum continued into the 2024-25 season under Johnny Jackson's leadership. AFC. Wimbledon finished 5th in League Two, securing another playoff campaign. After nullifying Notts County over 2 legs in the semi-finals, winning 1-0 aggregate, they faced Walsall in the playoff final at Wembley. A superb first-half injury time strike from Miles Hippolyte proved to be the only goal of the game, securing a 1-0 victory and immediate return to League One after a 3-year absence. Key players in this latest promotion included top scorer Matty Stevens with 17 goals, lone goalkeeper Owen Goodman, who won the league. 2 Golden Glove Award in the core of that rebuild squad: Josh Neufville, Ryan Johnson, Omar Bougiel, Joe Lewis, Captain Jake Reeves, goal hero Miles Hippolyte, Marcus Brown and Riley Harbertle. This swift return to the third tier demonstrated the club's continued resilience and the success of Jackson's rebuilding strategy. A testament to allowing a manager the time and backing to implement his vision. A rare luxury in the frenetic world of modern football, proving that slow cooking often yields the best results.
The journey of AFC Wimbledon through the football pyramid. It's marked by periods of sustained success under specific managers Terry Brown's leadership. From 2007 to 2012, yielded 3 promotions, taking the club from the Isthmian Premier to League Two. Neil Ardley, a figure deeply connected to the original club's heritage, he not only stabilized AFC Wimbledon in the Football League, but he also masterminded that 2016 promotion to League One during his 6-year tenure more recently. Johnny Jackson, after a challenging first season following relegation, was entrusted with a squad overhaul which culminated in that celebrated return to League One in 2025. These instances suggest that, despite the inherent pressures of a fan-owned structure which can sometimes lead to heightened scrutiny, AFC Wimbledon has benefited from periods of managerial stability, allowing managers the time and the backing to implement their strategic plans for squad building, for developing a cohesive team ethos. That's been a crucial ingredient in their multiple promotions, and their ability to navigate the distinct challenges posed by different leagues. It reflects a commendable maturity within that fan ownership structure, often prioritizing a long-term vision over short-term reactions, a philosophical commitment to the grand project rather than the fleeting headline. Beyond their remarkable league progress, AFC Wimbledon has also created some memorable moments in cup competitions and achieved other notable distinctions, little cherries on top of their already impressive cake. They lifted the London Senior Cup in 2013-14, and then an FA Cup in 2018-19. That run, it captured national attention, like a sudden burst of sunshine on a grey day. After progressing through the early rounds, AFC Wimbledon, then a league. One side were drawn at home to Premier League West Ham United in the 4th round, in a classic FA Cup upset truly reminiscent of the original club's crazy gang heroics. The Dons triumphed 4-2 on January 26, 2019. Goals from Kwesi Appiah, a brace from Scott Wagstaff and a late clincher from Toby Sibic secured a famous victory, a proper old-school giant killing, proving the spirit was alive and kicking. They were eventually knocked out in the 5th round by Millwall, but that cup run particularly that emphatic win over West Ham. It powerfully evoked memories of Wimbledon's giant-killing past and brought widespread positive coverage, a rare and welcome glow. They also hold a record, a statistical anomaly for the purist, the longest unbeaten league run in English senior football's 78 consecutive league games without defeat. Between February 2003 and December 2004, a streak of relentless competence that must have driven their opponents to distraction. And they're recognized as the first club formed in the 21st century to make it into the Football League. A quiet historical marker of their unique journey. Their achievements all create strong narrative links to the most celebrated periods of the original Wimbledon FC. It suggests, doesn't it, that the Wimbledon spirit, that blend of resilience, defiance, and an ability to punch above their weight, has genuinely been rekindled, and it's a living, breathing characteristic of the fan-owned successor, a testament to the enduring power of a collective dream.
The defining characteristic of AFC Wimbledon, it's its ownership structure. The club is owned by its fans through the Dons Trust. This model, you see, it's not merely a symbolic gesture, it's a practical framework, one that shapes every aspect of the club's existence, from its governance and financial management to its community engagement and its long-term strategic direction. Like the subtle, intricate gears of a well-made clock, the core tenets of the Dons. Trust's operation are quite straightforward if you consider them. Firstly, democratic membership. Anyone can become a member of the Dons. It operates on a strict one-member, one-vote basis, regardless of how many shares an individual might own in the club's PLC or the size of any donation they've made. This ensures a beautiful, pure equality in decision-making power among the thousands of members worldwide. Then, there's the elected board. The Dons Trust Board, the DTB, it's composed of members elected by the wider membership in annual elections. This board is responsible for representing the members' interests and for overseeing the strategic direction of the trust. And by extension, the football club, a proper bottom-up democracy rarely seen in the shiny boardrooms of the modern game. Crucially, the trust holds a controlling interest in AFCW plc. This means nearly 80% of voting rights and approximately 69% of shares as of September 2024. This PLC is the holding company for the various entities that make up AFC Wimbledon, including the men's football club, the women's team, and the company that owns the Plough Lane Stadium. This majority ownership, particularly the ability to command over 75% of votes for special resolutions and over 50% for ordinary resolutions, it gives the Dons Trust the power to appoint the directors of AFCW plc and to approve or reject significant changes to the club's articles of association or major strategic decisions such as the sale of further equity. It's the ultimate veto power, the sacred no against another betrayal. No more surprise suitcases to Milton Keynes, no sir. Finally, the decision-making processes, day-to-day operational decisions for the football club are delegated to the AFCW plc board and its employed executives, because even a democracy needs people to actually do the work. However, the Dons Trust Board meets regularly with agendas set and minutes recorded decisions on contentious issues, or those require member approval. They're often taken by formal vote. Crucially, certain major decisions, defined as restricted actions. Things like issuing new shares beyond a pre-agreed threshold that might dilute the trust's overall control, or making fundamental changes to the club's identity or home ground. These require a direct vote of the entire Dons Trust membership. This tiered structure, it ensures that while the club can operate efficiently, ultimate control on fundamental issues remains with the collective fan base. A beautiful, slightly convoluted,
but entirely necessary mechanism to safeguard the soul.
Despite its many strengths, the fan ownership model at AFC Wimbledon is not without significant challenges, particularly in the highly competitive and increasingly commercialized environment of modern professional football. It's like trying to run a beautifully crafted vintage car in a Formula One race. The most persistent challenge, naturally, is financial limitations competing financially with privately owned clubs, many of which are backed by wealthy benefactors or corporations capable of injecting substantial, dizzying funds. The costs of operating a professional football club, maintaining a competitive playing budget, running a stadium, they are continually spiraling, particularly in leagues like AFL League One. It's a relentless drain, a bottomless pit of expenditure. This leads to a heavy reliance on continuous fundraising and volunteerism. The club's financial model is heavily reliant on the ongoing generosity and tireless efforts of its supporters. This includes continuous fundraising through initiatives like bond issues, share offers, and direct donations to cover operating losses, service debt repayments, such as those for the new stadium, and fund investments in the squad or facilities. Furthermore, a significant number of club operations, particularly on match days and within community programs, they depend on the dedication of unpaid volunteers. While a strength, this reliance also brings its own pressures, a constant, low-level hum of responsibility. Sometimes, you just wonder if the transfer market isn't just a giant, perpetual motion machine for lawyers and agents, leaving the fans to pick up the tab with bake sales. Then there's the complexity of democratic decision-making or democratic control as a core principle, the process of consulting and gaining approval from a large membership base for major decisions. It can sometimes be slower or more complex than the autocratic decision-making possible in a privately owned club. Balancing diverse opinions and expectations of thousands of fan owners, it requires careful management and clear, constant communication. It's like herding cats, but with more emotion and investment. This can even lead to a potential for fan ownership fatigue. There have been discussions and observations within the fan base and associated media about a potential weariness. This refers to concerns that the constant need for financial contributions and the inherent limitations of the model might lead to weariness among some supporters, or that younger fans who didn't experience the trauma of the 2002 relocation may not have the same emotional investment in the intricacies of the fan ownership structure. However, it is also clear that a very large and vocal majority of fans remain fiercely committed to the principle of fan ownership, a deep well of resilience waiting to be tapped. And finally, the relentless task of debt management and financial sustainability. The club has had to manage significant debt, including the Plough Lane bonds, around 10 million initially, now reduced to approximately 8 million, and the bridging loan required for the stadium construction, which needed refinancing. Player sales have often been a crucial source of income to help offset operating losses and balance the books, a necessary, if sometimes painful, sacrifice. The club constantly strives to achieve financial sustainability, aiming to at least break even before interest payments. These challenges, they highlight the practical difficulties and immense pressures of maintaining a competitive, ethically run, fan-owned club. In the demanding landscape of contemporary professional football, the model requires continuous engagement, innovation, and a deep well of supporter commitment. It's not for the faint of heart, this fan ownership business. AFC Wimbledon's financial strategy is a constant balancing act between on-pitch ambition and the principles of prudent, sustainable management inherent in its fan-owned structure. The overarching aim to be financially self-sufficient in the long term, a beacon of sensible accounting in a sea of red ink. Key revenue streams include matchday income, ticket sales, hospitality catering, These are vital, the very lifeblood. The club aims for strong average attendances. For instance, a target of 7,500 was cited for the 2021-22 season. To maximize this crucial stream. Then there's commercial income. This includes sponsorships, like the long-standing deal with Sports Academy and the stadium naming rights with Cherry Red Records, advertising merchandise sales, and income from non-match day use of the stadium's event spaces. The ground share agreement with the London Broncos rugby league team at Plough Lane also contributes to sports sharing a common patch of turf. Of course, player sales, as with many clubs operating outside the very top echelons, income generated from the sale of players developed through the academy or astutely recruited can be a significant, albeit unpredictable, source of funds to reinvest or cover deficits. A necessary, if sometimes heartbreaking, part of the cycle. And finally, the unique heartbeat of the club. Supporter contributions. This remains a unique and critical component encompassing season ticket revenue, proceeds from bond issues and debentures, direct donations, and various other fundraising activities driven by the Dons Trust and the wider fan base. It's the ultimate crowdfunding success story continually unfolding. Ethical considerations also play a role in the club's financial dealings. For instance, AFC Wimbledon has a stated policy of not accepting advertising from gambling companies, with the only exception being the contractually obliged display of the FL's official betting sponsor. A quiet stand, a matter of principle in a world increasingly awash with neon lights and tempting odds. The inherent financial pressures of competing, they've led to ongoing discussions within the Dons and Trust and the wider membership about the optimal balance between maintaining the current level of fan ownership and attracting external investment, while the core principle of majority fan control, over 50% of voting rights via the Dons Trust, remains sacrosanct. There have been debates and even votes on potentially reducing the Trust's minimum required shareholding in AFCW plc from the current 75% plus one share for special resolutions to a level closer to 50.01%. The rationale behind such proposals is typically to create more headroom, to sell equity or shares to new minority investors, thereby injecting fresh capital to pay down debt, invest in infrastructure like the training ground, or bolster the playing budget. These discussions, they reflect a pragmatic adaptation to financial realities rather than an abandonment of the fan-owned ideal. Crucially, any such change to allow more equity to be sold would still require the approval of Dons Trust members, and the articles of AFCW plc have been structured to ensure that no single third-party investor can own more than 15% of the voting shares, and that the Dons Trust will always retain overall majority control. This evolving approach demonstrates a mature grappling with how to best secure the club's future by potentially allowing greater minority investment, while fiercely protecting the fundamental principle of ultimate fan control, a delicate dance, indeed, on the tightrope of modern football. AFC Wimbledon's story, from its defiant birth to its remarkable journey up the football pyramid and its emotional return to a new home at Plough Lane, it transcends the usual narratives of a football club. It stands as a potent symbol of resilience, the enduring power of supporters, and the importance of community spirit in an increasingly commercialized sporting world. A quiet roar against the relentless hum of corporate greed. The entire history of Wimbledon's story, from its defiant birth to its remarkable journey up the football pyramid and its emotional return to a new home at Plough Lane. It transcends the usual narratives of a football club, It stands as a potent symbol of resilience, the enduring power of supporters, and the importance of community spirit in an increasingly commercialized sporting world. A quiet roar against the relentless hum of corporate greed. The entire history Wimbledon's story from its defiant birth to its remarkable journey up the football pyramid and the ashes of perceived betrayal. And the tragic loss of their original club, the supporters. They didn't succumb to despair, didn't simply pack up their scarves and find a new hobby. Instead, they channeled their passion, their determination, into building a new club from scratch. Starting in the 9th tier of English football, the 6 promotions achieved in their first 13 seasons, culminating in reaching League One, and their subsequent return to the 3rd tier in 2025. They underscore extraordinary resilience, a bounce-back ability that would shame a rubber ball. This journey, it was fueled entirely by fan power. The club is owned and democratically controlled by its supporters. Through the Don's trust, ensuring that its destiny remains in the hands of those who cherish it most. The monumental effort to fund and build the new Plough Lane Stadium, largely through supporter-led initiatives like crowdfunding and bond issues. It is perhaps the most visible manifestation of this collective power, a physical monument built on dreams and spare change. Community spirit. It's not just a slogan for AFC Wimbledon, it is a founding principle and a daily practice. The club's extensive outreach programs, the award-winning AFC Wimbledon Foundation, and the remarkable impact of the fan-led Don's Local Action Group in tackling poverty and providing support across southwest London, all demonstrate a profound commitment to its local area. AFC Wimbledon serves as a powerful living example of what can be achieved when these values are central to a club's existence, a shining beacon in a world too often darkened by selfishness.
In an age when football clubs resemble hedge funds in shorts, AFC Wimbledon stands quietly apart. Born not in a boardroom but in a pub, by fans who refuse to vanish politely, the club is a murmured protest in a world full of neon megaphones where others talk of brand growth and market penetration. Wimbledon talks about volunteer rotas and raffle ticket stubs. The relocation of the old Wimbledon FC to Milton Keynes in 2002, an act of administrative burglary that would have made even Dick Turpin blush, sparked something rare. Organized, determined Hope supporters, with little more than indignation and a spreadsheet, built a club from scratch. AFC Wimbledon, owned by its fans through the Don's trust, was more than a team. It was a spiritual counterweight, a homemade soup in the world of vending machines. They started in the combined counties League 9th tier pitches where the corner flags list in the wind like disillusioned palm trees. But they climbed 7 promotions in 13 years, and all while keeping their principles on side, rejecting gambling sponsorships, engaging deeply with local causes, and offering a vision of football where the fans are more than scenery. Their return to Plough Lane in 2020, funded in no small part by the fans themselves, wasn't just about bricks and seats. It was a resurrection, a spiritual alignment of postcode and purpose, like finding your childhood jumper in a charity shop, slightly worn, but unmistakably yours. Still, this isn't a Disney film, it's League One on a rainy Tuesday. The club must balance ambition with a wallet that wheezes a bit in winter. Plans to expand the stadium, nurture academy players, stay solvent. Keep dreaming. Each step requires patience, creativity, and a fan base that turns up even when the pies run out and the floodlights flicker. And yet, despite everything, they persist.
quietly influential in governance debates, frequently name-checked in Parliament when someone needs a good example of football done properly. A case study in decency, a living reminder that clubs can belong to communities, not just conglomerates. John Green, the American author who once fell in love with their story, has helped tell it to the world. A 3-part series, Fan-Owned Football, now speaks the tale with clarity and affection. And why not? It's a story that feels impossible until you realize it happened. So, sleep now, listener, dream of temporary dugouts and borrowed kit, of late winners and soggy fanzines, of fans who said no and meant it, who built something lasting from the ashes of betrayal. AFC. Wimbledon isn't a miracle. It's something better. It's proof. Good night from Lowerleagues. We'll see you again soon, just past the roundabout, next to the ground with one working turnstile and a tea lady who knows your name. Sleep tight.